Welcome to New York's number two sports show. Let's discuss the New York Yankees 2026 opening day roster. We are, as I'm recording this, just about a little over 24 hours away from the first game, which will be the Yankees at the San Francisco Giants. Actually, the first game of Major League Baseball. The only game on Wednesday, and then most of the other teams will start on Thursday or Friday. So a rare series that begins on Wednesday and ends on Saturday. 3 game set in San Francisco. But as far as this 2026 roster is concerned, it really is the Yankees running back the roster that we saw at the end of last year. Um, and what I will concede is, look, if you compare where it is now on the roster compared to a year ago at the start of the 2025 season, that is pretty different. It was really mostly what was done at the trade deadline. A lot of moves were made, and almost all of them um, involve players that are on the team now and have pretty significant roles. I mean, really, like, and the bullpen, two of your top members were players acquired at the deadline. Now, on the flip side, Yankees didn't really lose many significant pieces, players that had big roles. Two of them were relievers in Devin Williams and Luke Weaver, both going to the Mets. But like, there was a world where this roster could have consisted of, literally, the opening day roster could have theoretically consisted of everyone that had been on the team on some level last year, right? Either in the organization or playing game, like literal just games last year. Where I'll start out with in terms of the whole running it back thing is there's three players that were not part of the organization last year that will be on this opening roster. And really, for all of them, you could make the case like they could have not even been on the roster. One of them would have probably been, and that one is Ryan Weathers, who was acquired from the Marlins in the offseason, left-handed starter, son of David Weathers. But even him, like, part of the reason why he's in this role is like they they're starting out with a four-man rotation, right? Due to they having off days, right? And so one of the big, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit. Luis Heel, he is in essence the fifth starter. He is actually going to be starting in the minors. We're going to talk about a theme where you have some pretty regular major league players that are going to, for the Yankees, that have been on the team the last 2 years, that are to some varying degrees for different reasons are going to be starting out in Scranton with the AAA club. But the point with Weathers is, there's that, right? Like, they chose him over Heel. That's one thing. But like, you don't have the season starting Rodon, Cole, and then Clark Schmidt, right? So what I'm trying to say is, like, in some ways, if you were fully healthy, now look, if they were fully healthy, they may not have even acquired Weathers, but the point still stands, right? He being, I think, the most significant outside of the organization move that they made. But even that one, I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking a few months from now and he's like out of the rotation. It's just the way that it kind of is. Even if he were to pitch somewhat well, right? If the rest of them stay healthy and you have, again, Cole, Rodon returning, Schmidt's not till down the line, who knows that leaves Weathers. Randall Grichuk, they brought him in on a minor league deal kind of midway through spring training. He is going to be someone who is in the lineup against left-handed pitching. Will play the corner outfield spots, probably mostly left field, but I think in certain situations, right field as well. When, um, on days where maybe Judge shifts, where Stanton is out, Judge shifts to DH, I think they'd probably feel a lot more comfortable going with Grichuk and right, but I think he'll play both corners. And so my point with Grichuk is, as well, he could end up having a pretty big role, but even in a best case scenario, it's the lesser side of a platoon. And I have my questions about him. Like, look, I hope he does well, and if it can take Trent Grisham's bat out of the lineup against lefties, I'm all for it. It makes sense. Grichuk is basically taking the Austin Slater role. Slater was terrible down the stretch, and he was really the one guy. And there was some mutual interest. Like, it wasn't like it was a completely no. Like, there was talk. Ultimately, he ended up going to the Tigers, but now I on a minor league deal, but I believe he actually just latched on with the Marlins, so kind of bouncing around. So the point there is, though, is that Grichuk, I think he didn't really have a great spring training. Part of it was because he came aboard a little bit later on. Just today, actually, he did homer against a righty. So maybe that gets him sort of going now. But yeah, it didn't look great. Not going to hold that against him. But again, a guy that it's a minimal sort of role player. And then the third one, as far as not from the organization, Cade Winquist, who is a reliever that the Yankees got in the Rule 5 draft from the St. Louis Cardinals. Winquist will become the club's first Rule 5 draft selection to appear in a major league game since Josh Phelps in 2007. So a very rare scenario for the Yankees to even dip into the MLB Rule 5 draft. And Cade Winquist didn't really do all that well in spring either. I think a big reason as to why he's making the team, and clearly they feel highly about it. This is a guy that I don't think he pitched above, and I want to get this right. I don't believe that he's pitched above double A. Let's see, as far as his minor league career. Yeah, had not pitched above double A. Um, didn't do all that well in spring, but the thing with Rule 5 is the Yankees can't just send him down, right? If they choose to basically waive him, if you will, like he's going to be gone and likely back to the Cardinals, right? That's just the way it works. Now you can put him on the injured list. You can manipulate to a very small degree if you wanted to. But I think that because he doesn't really have the options, literally you lose him from the organization. And the way Brian Cashman kind of works is, in essence, once they made that move to get him in the Rule 5 draft, you could almost ticket him for the roster. But again, another guy that really at this point is he got one of the last spots on this club. So it goes back to the theme of they are basically running this thing back. And I would have liked for them to have made some more changes. Now, look, they made you what they did this past season. And by the deadline, where they see that they need to make moves, they may do that, right? So it is kind of an ever evolving, fluid situation. Look, the stubbornness of the organization does bother me. I've made that clear many, many times. But I guess I'll give my prediction on the Yankees and the division after we kind of go through the roster. But look, I think this should be a good like, in terms of regular season. Like this, if they stay healthy, they should be a pretty good team. They should be a competitive team, and they should be a team that wins a good amount of baseball games. But let's talk about the roster here, and let's start with the hitters. And we're gonna kind of bounce around a little bit, but let's kind of go position by position. And really, again, I kind of started it out by just giving you some of the new names, and even those new names may not even be around all that long. So there's going to be a lot of players that you recognize here, but we're going to talk about players that made it and ones that didn't as well, but ones that you probably will likely see at some point in the near future. So for the catchers, they end up sticking with the lefty brigade, excuse me, where Austin Wells will get the lion's share of starts and opportunities at catcher. And Wells, did pretty well for Dominican Republic in the World Baseball Classic. It wasn't a great regular season for Austin Wells last year. It just to keep it simple. I thought that he had a really good stretch in the middle of 2024, which was basically, I think that counted as his rookie season. He came up at the end of 23. I think 24 was considered his rookie year. And he did cool off at the end in the playoffs in 24. But last year, yeah, just left a lot to be desired, but he's back in there with a pretty good role. JC Escar is going to be the backup catcher. And that was someone that was kind of on the bubble. He did pretty well in spring. I think that his offensive stats were not good at all last year, but I think there's more there. Like, I think Escar, I do see some potential. Now, he's not young, but I think that Escar, like, I'm curious to see what he can do. Ideally, I just wish that he was a righty, right? I just, to have Wells, Escar, and even Ben Rice. And Ben Rice, I don't know how much we're going to see him as the catcher start. Like, they did not use him much at all at the catcher position. I think expect to see him almost exclusively at first base. Now, in emergency situations, certainly he could be the catcher. We saw that down the stretch where he started a good amount of games and Escar was kind of on the outs. But for now, they're going with Escar. That could change, though, right? Depending on how the roster goes. Maybe they do go with a Wells-Rice combo, but for now, this is what they're going to do. And again, it's all lefties. I don't love that. They're a very lefty-heavy lineup, which kind of puts some players in the minors, which we're going to talk about, and it kind of led to someone like Randall Grichuk having a role. First base, it's going to be a combination of Ben Rice and Paul Goldschmidt. And for that, where things have changed from the beginning of last year to this year is now Ben Rice is, he really emerged. He is going to be the guy that starts against right-handed pitching. And for Goldschmidt, he'll start against lefties. I think that should be the way it's simply put, right? And I'm fine. If you want to give Rice the odd start against a lefty, I'm good with that too. But Paul Goldschmidt, he's been very good in spring. I didn't think they'd bring him back, to be honest with you. He got off to a great start last year, really cooled off by the end. But we'll see what he does. I think if you can use him the right way and not overdo it, keep him somewhat fresh, you can get a better Paul Goldschmidt later in the season. He still has ability. Look, like I think the power is not really going to be there much. I think he's someone that can still, give you a solid batting average, work some good at bats, give you serviceable defense. Like there's value for Paul Goldschmidt. Look, you'd rather there be a little more versatility there, but it is what it is. Like Goldschmidt is going to get starts and probably bat leadoff against lefties, right? Like it'll be Grisham to start against righties batting leadoff, and Goldschmidt will be batting first against southpaws. So that's the deal there. But it's a bit of a change from the start of last year, where Ben Rice is really that starting first baseman for the most part. Jazz Chisholm Jr., who's going to be heading into his free agent season, is going to be the second baseman. Last year provided a lot of power, got hurt a little bit. So he'll hope to, stay on the field and, not have, any, I think there was at least one injured list stint in about, I think it was maybe late April, early May. And maybe, I think he might've had one other short one. But look, Jazz, there's sky high potential there. I just hope he keeps it simple. He's someone that I think tries to do too much sometimes, and you see it, especially in the playoffs. There's so much there for him. There's so much athleticism. There's so much ability to his game that can help you win ball games. I just hope for him, and I just fear going into again, like going to be a free agent. That I just hope the more simple Jazz is, the better. Shortstop, Jose Caballero is going to be the guy. Now, Anthony Volpe starts the year on the injured list. Presumably we'll see Volpe in May. Obviously had a horrible year last year. Really just in his first 3 years as a major leaguer, it's left a lot to be desired. There was good defense the first couple of years. He struggled a bit last year. He's still young. They're not giving up on him, but I hope that Jose Caballero can take advantage of the opportunity. When all is said and done, I don't see Caballero keeping the job. And in some ways, Caballero, I think, as that sort of pinch runner, not jack of all trades, but versatile guy that can play really all over the diamond, a little bit in the outfield as well. And I think that's where he's most valuable. That all said, would love to see him somehow take the job away from Volpe. I don't know that that's going to happen, but Caballero is going to play a lot at shortstop, which brings me to Ryan McMahon. Ryan McMahon is basically the backup shortstop, which is a little concerning. That ended up taking out, basically they wanted to keep Ascara. Now they could have went with 5 bench hitters. They're going with 4. Look at it this way. The bench essentially versus righties is going to be mostly Ascara, Goldschmidt, Rosario, who I haven't mentioned yet, and Grichuk. And so it's basically going to be McMahon is going to be like the backup shortstop. So, and he's an amazing third baseman, one of the best. And I'm excited for his defense. I do worry about McMahon as far as the offense is concerned. If nothing else, hopefully he can get some of that pop back that he had with Colorado, right? Run into some more home runs. He actually had a pretty good postseason. I do, that Blue Jay series where there wasn't a whole lot going on, McMahon was one of the few guys that actually did put up good at bats, did pretty well. So he is capable offensively, but look, he's going to have a low batting average and a lot of strikeouts. He's trying to change his batting stance, but again, I'm excited for what he can do at third, but he will back up at short, which I don't know how he'll do there. And again, it leads me to believe that Caballero is going to play a lot until Volpe comes back at short. As far as, I guess, rounding out the infield, I guess I'll bring up Ahmed Rosario, where he will be a guy that I think you will see almost always when lefties are out there, right? Spelling mostly McMahon and maybe every now and then Jazz. So expect to see Rosario a lot at third, maybe a little bit at second, and here and there maybe in the outfield. Like, I think it's going to be mostly second and third. He was even in this last spring training game. They did have him at first base as well. So again, he does provide versatility. He's not very good defensively. See, whereas Caballero, like I kind of trust him more on the defensive side. Rosario, yes, he can play multiple positions. Doesn't mean he's great at them. But what he is good at is kind of like what Grichuk is, but a little bit less pop. Rosario is a guy that can really do well against lefties. And so I think that this bench, while it's not perfect by any means, but I think just the platoon options and things like that to start the season is one of the better benches that the Yankees have probably had in some time, right? Because it's either going to be a bench that's Rosario, Grichuk, Goldschmidt when righties are pitching. When lefties are pitching, that's a bench that's looking like it's probably like what? Ben Rice, Trent Grisham, and Ryan McMahon, something to that effect, right? And so that is pretty good, and it gives you different options to mix and match with. As far as the outfield goes, it's what it was last year, but minus Jason Dominguez. And I should mention as well, Oswaldo Cabrera does not start the year on the team, which was expected because of the injury that he sustained last year. I think we'll see him at some point, but don't forget about Max Schumann. Schumann, who was with the A's, the Yankees got him in the offseason, looked pretty good in spring and is versatile. So if the opportunity presents itself and it's early, they may actually opt for Schumann before Oswaldo, which is in like, but if it's more down the line and then it presents itself, it could be Cabrera because he's been here and they really he's a guy that is in some ways a fan favorite. Not that they make decisions based off that, but I think the sooner or the decision I think gets to me is made as Schumann. I think later though, May, June, maybe it's Cabrera. But again, just it's interesting that Cabrera is, he's a guy that really hasn't spent much time in AAA since he got called up, but that's where he'll be to start. Speaking of that, Jason Dominguez, who was on the team all of last season, the major league team, he is starting in AAA. And they pretty much made the decision like before spring started because Dominguez did very well in spring training. Look, you wish he was better as a right-handed hitter. He's not, and that's costing him. You wish that you could trust him more defensively. You just don't. But what he is a guy that is just a very sound hitter as a lefty, really good, has power potential and speed. And this is where I just wish Trent Grisham wasn't on this roster. I think it's only going to be a 1-year situation. Like even if Trent Grisham kills it this year, I think it's just the end of the road, just based on the other options. I mean, Spencer Jones was awesome this spring, and I think that Spencer Jones, he deserves a real opportunity at some point. Getting older, I mean, like, look, like I think Spencer Jones is right around, I think 24 years old. Like, I mean, look, Aaron Judge didn't come up until his mid-20s, so the same thing could happen there. But Jones, I'm very intrigued by what he can do. And so, again, it's sort of Dominguez lost the spot, right? Essentially, Grichuk takes that spot, but Dominguez, he played well. Like I gotta say, he really did. And Spencer Jones, both of them did. But yet it's going to be mostly Bellinger in left, Grisham in center, Judge in right, with Giancarlo Stanton at DH. And Stanton will start the year with the team, not on the injured list, which is nice to see. You got to expect that at some point he's going to be out. I'd be so surprised, pleasantly surprised, if Stanton made the whole season without being on the injured list. But it's probably going to come at some point. You just don't know when or how long it'll be. But the lineup really does look mostly like it did at the end of last season, where at that point, Jason Dominguez, technically he was on the roster. He wasn't playing really at all. And so the biggest difference to me when I look at, now obviously Volpe is out. Caballero is more in, even though we did see Caballero regardless. But the biggest difference, what I'm hoping for, is that you don't see Trent Grisham at all against lefties, but you could. I don't know for sure. Like there could be the odd time where Trent Grisham is batting 7th or 8th or something against a lefty. I would prefer it to be Grichuk, even though I don't know that he's the answer. I'm just very anti-Grisham against lefties with what he did last year. In his career, he actually really wasn't that much worse against lefties than righties, ironically, but he really killed them in the playoffs. So that's sort of the offensive outlook. And really, it does, I mean, you have a lot of options, like I said in AAA. I think I mentioned most, again, with Schumann, Dominguez, Spencer Jones, Oswaldo Cabrera. There's some other guys that I don't really expect to see, like a Paul DeYoung. I don't anticipate a guy like that being on the team really under any circumstance, but you do have some decent options. And apologize if I am forgetting some. As far as the pitching, let's discuss one point where I think it's the strength of the team, which is the starting pitching and the depth, and then where I actually think the weakness of the team. Even though I don't the offense, I don't come playoff time. If the lineup stays the way it is now, I have serious doubts, but I don't know what the changes will be. But the bullpen for the here and now, I think is probably the worst part of the team, in my opinion. So the starters, it's gonna be a four-man starting rotation where it's gonna be Max Fried is gonna be the opening day starter against Logan Webb, so a pretty good pitching matchup there. Cam Schlittler will be the game two starter, although he was out a little bit to start spring, so he will probably be piggybacked by either Ryan Yarborough or Paul Blackburn. So, but basically, he looked pretty good. Like, so yeah, he'll be limited to about 70 to 75 pitches, in his first outing. But I think soon thereafter, expect him to have just the normal workload. Will Warren, who was fantastic in spring, 1.42 ERA in 25 and one third innings in spring. Warren looked like he really was a pleasant surprise last year, where he did get roughed up badly in a few outings, but you take those away. And it was consistency, and they needed that, right? With Garrett Cole out for the season, Luis Hill was out for a large part of last year. Will Warren has really found his way to having surpassed like a Luis Hill, right? And now those two by the end of last year, they ended up going with Hill over Warren in game one of the LDS. Now, and I know maybe that was partially matchup dependent, Will Warren is really very comfortably kind of the number three guy in this current iteration. Ryan Weathers is the number four, and Ryan Weathers, his first start will begin the Seattle Mariners series. So the Yankees go from San Francisco to Seattle. Ryan Weathers looked good at the start of spring and then really struggled. Now, today, he did better against the Cubs. So maybe, again, hopefully that can give him some confidence and make him feel good going into this, start. But Ryan Weathers, I don't know. I think there's something intriguing about him, but also like I don't know how it goes. And so Luis Hill, who struggled for a lot of spring, although his last outing was great, he will probably rejoin the club a couple weeks into the season around April 11th. He'll be the fifth starter, right? So Hill starts in Scranton, which again it's just interesting because he's a guy that really, I don't know the last time that he was even there when it wasn't like a rehab situation, right? I think it's been probably a very long time. So that's where you're at now. And then at some point, Carlos Rodon comes back. It was known that he was going to miss the start of the season. The good thing too is the Yankees didn't really sustain any injuries in spring. So that was really good news, at least that we know of at this point. So it is Rodon is going to be coming back, I think maybe end of April. Garrett Cole, not so far after that. He's actually appeared in a couple of spring games. And then Clark Schmidt later in the season, maybe call it August or so. So there's a lot of options. And then as well, not that I'm super bullish on them, but you even do have like a Ryan Yarborough and a Paul Blackburn. There's just a lot of starting pitching options. I mean, you could reel off there about at least, again, including Schmidt, at least 8, and then again 9 and 10 when it comes to like a Yarborough and a Blackburn, and that's not even talking about like a Carlos Legrande, who had a very good spring, did struggle his last outing, but Legrande, there's a lot of promise there. At some point, maybe Elmer Rodriguez. Like, there's a lot of starting pitching here. I am excited about that more than anything with this team. But let's just discuss to close it out the bullpen. The bullpen, and I know that sometimes players do randomly emerge. We've seen it. Like, it happens almost every year where someone that was kind of in the back end or someone that maybe even started in AAA ends up being a big piece. It's weird like that when it comes to relievers in the bullpen. But the good news is this, and the heavy lifting that was done with this bullpen was at the deadline last year. David Bednar was fantastic and became the closer. And who's the most likely setup guy is Camilo Doval. And look, he might be, if there is an MLB season in 2027, with David Bednar being a free agent after this year, and you never know what happens. Camilo Doval, if he does well this year, he could be the closer come 2027. Again, that's looking way ahead. And with Doval, the stuff is there. It's just, can he harness it? And I kind of feel similarly about Fernando Cruz. Those are going to be sort of your main righty options leading into Bednar, right? 7th, 8th inning guys, with Tim Hill being the guy that is the lefty specialist. And with Tim Hill, I like Tim Hill, but you have to be careful with him because I don't like him against righties. He is clearly defined as a guy that is really tough against lefties, sidewinding, sort of funky delivery. And so Hill will factor in late innings, but really the glue of it is Bednar, Doval, and Cruz. And that's fine. Um, like that can be very good, right? There's a chance that it can be. But then there's question marks, right? We talked about Yarborough and Blackburn. Those are guys that are more going to be multi-inning, not necessarily high leverage. Like you never know. I mean, they've for different reasons, like they've been effective. Um, but we'll see. I'm not expecting a whole lot from them necessarily, but they could be thrust into some important situations possibly. But I kind of group somewhat similarly, just with Yarborough as a lefty and Blackburn as a righty. And then that leaves you with the three remaining guys that kind of made it, sort of the last three that made it out of the bullpen. And that is uh, Jake Bird, Brent Hedrick, and Cade Winquest. Now, Winquest, to me, in my opinion, he's kind of the last guy in that pen. He made it for reasons like that we spoke about before, as far as the Rule 5 draft. I think they'll give him a chance. Maybe he somehow does emerge, but I think that was, that could have gone to someone else had circumstances been different. Had you had the ability to send Cade Winquest down, I think that they probably would have. So then there's Jake Bird and Brent Hedrick. Now there's intrigue on both of them. Um, Jake Bird was the guy that they got at the deadline last year from Colorado, and really, he had been struggling with the Rockies when they got him, and then was really bad with the Yankees initially, and you never saw him again. They sent him down to AAA, and that was it. But you kind of figured, especially with the Yankees having lost a lot of guys, like I said, Williams, Weaver, even Mark Leiter Jr., and Ian Hamilton, Jake Cousins, who I know wasn't in the mix last year, just to name a few, right? And so there were spots open. And so Jake Bird, who had a fairly decent, not incredible, but an okay spring, um, he is someone that, I don't know, maybe he's a guy. He put up really good numbers with Colorado at the start of last year. He got off to like an amazing start. And look, you know what? In spring for the Yanks, 10 innings, 16 strikeouts, that's what you're looking for. So I have hope for him, but we did see him struggle a lot when they got him. And then Brent Hedrick, he's an interesting one. He is a different type lefty than Tim Hill. He's a guy that I think the Yankees would feel comfortable enough if they needed to have him against a righty, they would be okay with it. He's a hard throwing lefty. And he was kind of up and down last year, but he was, I don't know, Brent Hedrick, 1 walk, 12 strikeouts in spring and 7 innings this year. And just last year, put up some pretty impressive numbers, 23 innings, 30 strikeouts, really good whip, low opposing batting average. Like I'm very okay with seeing what Brent Hedrick can do. And he actually, you don't remember this, but Brent Hedrick, he actually made the club last year. He made the opening day roster last year, but was someone that we didn't see too often. And so, right, like maybe one of those guys can possibly start out well and just become part of the circle of trust late in games. So I don't love this bullpen on the whole. There's some guys in AAA that I'm sure we will see, like a Yuri De Los Santos, who we saw a lot of last year. Trying to think of else. They acquired this guy Angel Chiavelli, who had been with the Rockies. He really struggled in spring. So, but again, like that's the guy that maybe you do see at some point. But yeah, Kervin Castro is another name to keep in the back of your mind. But this bullpen, I think I don't love it so much as compared to like the starting pitching. I think is fantastic. And hopefully by the end of it, the starting pitching, if they stay healthy and they make the playoffs, I think that those guys can maybe go into the bullpen with key roles. But there's so much that's going to happen between now and then that it's hard to predict that sort of stuff. As far as the Yankees this year, I see if they stay healthy, which is very important, right? Like Aaron Judge gets hurt, the whole thing gets thrown off. But I think they're going to be around a 90-win team. I think that they are going to make the playoffs. And this AL East is really, really good, top to bottom. I mean, I think that it's about a 4-team race to win the division: Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Orioles. And that's no disrespect to the Rays. I think the Rays, I mean, in terms of let's even say they do finish in last place. That's like, that is has to be the best last place team out of the 6 divisions in Major League Baseball. And I'm telling you, they will do better than you think. So I don't mean I'm calling the Rays the number 5 team right now only because I really just think the other 4 teams are really good. And so I feel strongly in saying the Yankees will make the playoffs, and I think that they will be around that 90 win mark. But it's, winning the division won't be easy. I'll go ahead and say that they do. I'll go ahead and say that they will win the AL East. But last year when I was talking about it, it was really it seemed as if it was between the Yankees, Red Sox, and Orioles, and the Blue Jays, who weren't expected to do that much. They ended up, we know what they did. They won the division, the American League, and nearly won the World Series against the Dodgers. So you never know. And I think that those Yankees Blue Jays games are going to be really interesting with how the Blue Jays just dominated the Yankees last year. I'm probably looking forward to that more than anything. As far as just out of curiosity, what happens now? Do the Yankees sort of learn from mistakes, or hey, they ran it back, the Yankees? Now the Blue Jays roster is a little bit different themselves. They lost Bo Bichette, but they did acquire some starting pitching in Dylan Cease. So we'll see what happens. But I think that by virtue of this division being so strong, it kind of limits the win total that you could get. The Yankees have had their struggles head-to-head in division. That's been a major problem. So I'm looking at that in a big way. What are you going to do against the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, all of them, really? But I think that the Yankees, they should be a very competitive team, and I'm excited to get Garrett Cole back and see what he does. And yeah, I think that, but what happens in the playoffs, right? Like, it's hard to feel confident when it comes to that. But we will get a good idea based on the regular season, because based on what we saw in the regular season last year, was a precursor for what happened in the playoffs. So you're going to feel more confident. Like, I think 2024, the path was a little bit easier having faced Kansas City and Cleveland, right? That did help matters. But you knew the road was going to be there where, look, if you were being honest with yourself with how the Yankees played against Toronto, you couldn't feel great about that. And the Yankees barely got by the Red Sox, who didn't even have Roman Anthony. Cam Schlittler pitched out of his mind in that, winner-take-all Game 3. So they almost got knocked out in the wild card round. So I think that I hope that this roster evolves by the end of the season, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? Does somehow a Jason Dominguez or a Spencer Jones, for example, does either of them somehow end up playing a major role here, where I look back and it's like, I'm recording this thing, it's like, oh, they didn't make the roster. It kind of feels like they're not going to play a big role. Maybe they somehow do. All it takes is injury to change that. And injuries, especially with some of these Yankees players, definitely do happen. So we're going to see. But I think that there's some good depth to be had dipping into AAA currently. Like I said, really like the starting rotation when you include the players that are injured. Bullpen, I hope that there's some reinforcements that come in some form. And I would like the lineup to somehow not be so dependent on the home run. It's their strength and it's great, but they struck out a lot last year and they're very lefty heavy. I don't like the mix, and I don't know necessarily what the solutions are going to be, but this is how it's going to start out. So again, this is a extremely similar looking team to the end of 2025. They are running it back from what we saw when they lost to the Blue Jays. Hopefully they're able to get over the hump, like I said, because there's a lot expected of this Yankee team, and they've fallen short. 2009 was the last time they won a World Series, and they're going to hope to somehow change that. So, again, just wanted to touch upon this 2026 opening day Yankee roster. And now we will get started with the regular season that will begin against the Giants in San Francisco. Max Fried on the bump against Logan Webb. And hopefully the Yankees can get off to a good start here in 2026.